being here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Diego, and today I want to share with you some opinions I have, some other things that come from the project directly, and some things that come from conversations with different members of the community and other companies and so on. So today I want to talk about Selenium, if it's a good option for you today or not. And let's see what we get from this. It's working. So I'm Diego, I'm one of the leads of the project, and also the lead of the open source program office at Soft Labs. So if you want to reach out to me, I will be happy to have a conversation with you via LinkedIn or after the talk. I will be in that order for the speakers as well. One of the key things about this presentation, and it's kind of hidden, and I added this slide the last week, is that there is, in many places of this presentation, the topic of collaboration, teamwork. And I want you to take that to your work, to your office, to your personal life, that in general, many things get achieved when you are collaborating with people as a way, as a key to move forward in many different projects. So, the main idea, the overview of today's talk is, let's figure out if Selenium is a good option for today's world. And after that, I want to share a lot of context to make an informed decision. And then we're going to talk about like some testing frameworks, some testing tools, to give at the end some final thoughts, some alternatives that I have gathered along these past months. So, to start making this slightly interactive, please raise your hand if today, like today, 2024, almost fourth quarter, already fourth quarter, if you have a greenfield project, if you can choose any tool you want to do browser automation and testing, who would choose Selenium? Okay, that's a bigger amount than the one I expected to see, so that makes me happy. But I'm sorry to disappoint you, I wouldn't choose Selenium. I would not choose Selenium as a tool to automate my testing project. And the reason for that, I will share it in a moment, but I just want to share some facts with you. So yeah, it's a good choice because it automates the real browser that your end user is using. So Safari, Firefox, all the Chromium browsers, and so on. It's a standardized, it's based on a standard, and you can run it remotely and locally the way you want. Most importantly, it's a tool that is owned by the community, and it's grown by the community, so there is no company behind it that can control its future. But you have to do a lot to get something working when you just use Selenium. You have to write a lot of boilerplate code, you have to write reports, you have to do assertions. It's just too much work. And if I was someone today to start an automation project, I would say, oof, I have to do all this bunch of things to write one single test, right? And that's a bit too much. So that's why I just want to state that Selenium is not a testing framework. It's not a tool to do testing, because Selenium is just a low-level automation for browsers. And that's the game, that's the aim of the project, to have a low library that everyone can use to build things on top. A common question I get in meetups, in conferences is, when will Selenium adopt AI? I said, like, but where are you going to put it? It's like a low-level automation tool. AI will use Selenium to serve you. Like, AI uses a lot of primitives to build on top of that, right? And Selenium is one of those primitives. Another example is, if you build a website today, in 2024, would you use plain JavaScript and HTML? Or would you use a framework that gives you something working out of the box, and you focus on delivering business value, good use cases for your end users, and so on, right? So that's key when you want to choose a tool. What is the tool that helps you achieve your goal faster rather than building a bunch of boilerplate code to get something done? And that's why it's really annoying for us in the project when people start comparing Selenium with Cypress and Puppeteer and Playwright and so on, because you cannot compare apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. You cannot compare a fully fledged testing framework like Playwright, which is a great tool. It's such a delight to use Playwright, like npm install and you get many things working out of the box. It's really nice, same thing with Cypress. The user experience is much more delightful, I would say, because these are tools on one side made by companies who have like a lot of economic power, but also they have spent time to make a tool easy to use. Selenium is a low-level automation browser library that helps you automate browsers in the best way you can, but you have to do things on top. That's why, before sharing with you different alternatives instead of Selenium, I want to give you some context. Actually, a lot of context. Like most of the presentation is actually context, and then the last part is it goes quite fast. And this is what we have always wanted people to do, like to do informed decisions. If you use Playwright, you should know why you're choosing Playwright. What are the risks? What are the benefits? Same thing with Selenium, same thing with Cypress, and so on. So let's get started with that context. I'm very lucky because the content I wanted to build for this context already existed. So the DevTools team in Chrome have been spending a lot of time into this test automation or browser automation problem, let's call it like that. And they started to build a lot of content that helps people understand why they're moving in the direction they're moving these days, which I will share that as well. So there is this blog post that you could go and read, but if you don't want to read, I will share that content with you right now. So in 10 minutes, you will be done with that. The first thing is that they're telling us the history of browser automation and testing. And everything started 20 years ago with Selenium, that was created by Jason Huggins. And the main idea was to automate a web application by injecting JavaScript into it, automate it, do some checks, and that's it. Actually, the first version of Selenium was a testing framework. But then, some years later, Simon Stewart said, and other people in the community said, this is pretty cool, but what if I want to use Java? What if I want to use a different programming language? What if I want to use a different context of the browser? So it had so many limitations, this initial version of Selenium, that Simon took the approach of like building an API around the browser. And what happened there is basically that you could automate the browser from outside, not from inside, which is what the first version was doing. At that point, Selenium and WebDriver were competing projects, right? And they were like, as today, like you see, like Playwright versus Selenium, Cypress versus, so competing projects. And they decided something, like if they were gonna serve the community, if they were gonna serve the industry with a good solution, the solution was going to be to merge them, to work together, to collaborate and have teamwork to move forward. Years passed by, this became a standard in 2018, which is called today the WebDriver Classic approach. And this brought basically the opportunity, the baseline to build an ecosystem. You have a standard that is basically some text written in a GitHub repository that says how browsers should behave when you click, when you type, and so on. And the most famous implementation of this standard is called Selenium. But on top of Selenium, there are many tools that have so much functionality for you that you don't need to do much to write a test. So you have Appium, you have Water, you have Nightwatch, you have Selenite, and many more. But that's only a bit of the ecosystem. You also have which I believe one of the gems, hidden gems of the WebDriver ecosystem, which is WebDriver.io. And this is actually a complete testing framework for browser and mobile automation. It has several plugins for reporting, to connect with cloud vendors, and so many more things that you can ever imagine. And it can also do like electron testing, component testing. It's a bit too much sometimes, but it's a very complete tool. There is a new approach that is coming up in the latest years that there are now frameworks being on top of frameworks to make your test even more agnostic. So for example, Serenity.js, you write your test in JavaScript or TypeScript, and there is a configuration file that you say, execute this test with Playwright, execute it with Cypress, or with Selenium, or with WebDriver.io. And this is trying to mitigate the problem that we're having so many tools in the JavaScript ecosystem that you cannot just keep track of them. So there is a new trend where people wrap everything for you, so your test is more stable along time. But you know, we see JavaScript everywhere, but we tend to forget that around 70% of the web is still written in PHP. So there is a binding for WebDriver made in PHP. And I'm going to talk about that a bit later. But there is also a testing framework and a web scraping framework built on top of that. So you know, this merge of two projects, Selenium and WebDriver, basically created an industry for many of us to collaborate, to work, and to grow professionally. And then at some point, we decided that JavaScript was going to be the tool we were going to use to build the web, and then many tools came along. The latest ones, Playwright, and in 2018, Cypress, also Puppeteer, and so on. And this brings us to a point where we can talk about two automation approaches. One is called high level and low level. So let's dig into them to understand the differences. And from there, we can start choosing our tools. So let's see. High level, let's start with Cypress. Basically, Cypress has something in the middle, a proxy in the middle that controls everything that goes in and out of the browser. Cypress works very similarly to the way Selenium used to work 20 years ago. It takes the JavaScript code, it's injected inside the browser, so your test is being executed along your web application. On one side, this is good because there is better access to all the elements inside the web application. But on the other side, this is a personal opinion, it's not ideal because your web application is not executing itself freely. Browsers execute commands in an event loop. So there is a stack of commands. Usually your web application would execute all the commands one after the other one, but when you inject the test, then there is like web application, a bit of the test, web application, a bit of the test. And Cypress claims that this is much better to avoid flaky tests. But if you think about it, your end user, what is your end user doing? They are not injecting JavaScript. They are using the browser from outside, so they cannot really have the same behavior. So something that might look more stable in Cypress could, at the end, be not so stable, because in the end, with your web application, you have like service workers, API calls, and many more things that could not be ideal. I think it's a great tool to do component testing, for example, or maybe like low prototyping for like quick testing, but I wouldn't really use Cypress as an end-to-end testing tool. We have the same case with TestCafe. TestCafe belongs to a company called DevExpress, and their business is to sell web components to other companies so they build their websites. At some point, they said, you know, there is no good testing tool out there. We're going to build our own test tool, and it's going to be called TestCafe. They have the same principle. There is a proxy in the middle that controls network calls, And they also have a bunch of code that basically tries to simulate human behavior for every single browser. So there is a module that simulates human behavior in Safari, one in Chrome, one in Edge, one in Firefox, and so on. And at some point, they got to the point like, oof, our business is to do web components, and we're spending a lot of time maintaining this framework, which is not our main source of income. So what do we do? I'm going to tell you the answer to that in a moment. We switch now to the low-level approach, which can be subdivided into the classic approach and the CDP. CDP is the Chrome DevTools protocol embedded in the Chromium browsers. And the main difference, to give it with an example, if you talk about WebDriver Classic, is based on HTTP, which is a way of saying that it's similar to email. Like you cannot continue the conversation until your request has a reply. That's HTTP basically. CDP uses WebSockets, and this enables a more fluent communication, like a phone call. Like you can keep talking, and maybe you will get a reply, or you get many replies and you just say a few things. So there is a more fluent communication. You can do more things while you're waiting for a reply, and so on. So what happens here? The thing is that the web has evolved so much since the classic approach was finished. And what happens there is like, okay, a web framework these days offers more things than just a front end. There are backend calls, there are things happening in the background, and it's not enough to validate that you can click and then a pop-up happens, or like an article gets in the shopping cart. That's not enough. Most of the time you have to validate that actually the call to Google Analytics is happening, that there are no errors being sent to the console log, that things are not leaking over there. So you need more grain control to what the browser is showing the end user. And that's where you have a wide range of use cases for low-level controls, like simulating a geolocation, network requests, I don't know, many more things. It's just an endless things. And CDP offers this since a long time. And that's why the version 4 of Selenium offers an interface to CDP so people can interact with these things in a more simple way. Basically because websites are more evolved and you need more control into what's happening there. So then, again, comes something called WebDriver by DAI. And what's the idea of this? And basically, I shouldn't be saying this because that has been one of the premises, but this is basically CDP standardized. CDP on not only Chrome DevTools protocols that works for Chromium, but a protocol that works across all browsers, Safari, Firefox, and Chromium-based browsers. And here again, the Chrome DevTools team are helping us to promote and pass the word along. And the idea is that every single browser automation and testing tool can use WebDriver by DAI instead of just raw CDP. And the best example of this is Puppeteer. Puppeteer that came in 2018 or 2017 as one of the Selenium killers. They realized that we need to collaborate to actually offer a better tool to cover every single use case and every single browser. So the implementation of the standard by DAI is very advanced in Chrome, in Chromium-based browsers, and in Firefox. So now Puppeteer is not a tool that only automates Chromium, but also automates Firefox as well. And when Apple catches with Safari, when Apple catches up with Safari, then Puppeteer will be able to automate Safari as well. So this is just opening the gate for more people to use automation in different ways. And this is just basically expanding the WebDriver by DAI ecosystem. So we had all these folks before here, and now we have also Puppeteer. So let's have a summary between high and low level. And the summary, this is greatly summarized by the folks in Test Cafe. They saw that they were doing many things in their framework that were already solved out there. They saw that CDP, a tool that is out there, open source, many of the things we're doing in our framework are already solved in CDP and inside the browser. So they had so much code inside their solution, inside their proxy, that basically it was an overhead for them. So they removed much of that code. They're now using CDP, and my prediction is that eventually they will use BiDi in the end. And what this made for them is basically that they reduced a lot of their maintenance they had to do in their code. So they could ship faster, they could use a tool that is more performant for the goal they wanted to achieve. And basically from, I think it's version 3, if you're automating a Chromium browser, you're going to be using CDP. And I think eventually when BiDi is ready, they will move to BiDi. And something that is super interesting is that they have their test suite, and they were running tests with the old version and with the new version that uses CDP. And they saw improvement in the performance in their tests. So the green bars you see is the execution time of the test suite when using the new version. And they say that they see an improvement from 40 to 70%, so a reduction in the time. And basically this is because all the overhead they had in their framework is now being assumed by the browser itself, like network interception and many more things is being done actually in the browser instead of in the framework. So one interesting question comes here, like, what if Cypress were to do something like this? Maybe it would be faster, or even faster than Selenium and Playwright and so on. So basically the key is that they see a way to collaborate, work together, and now have a better tool for their users. That's kind of the summary here. That was an express version of all the context I wanted to share with you. And basically I want to dig now into the conversation of, with this context we have, how would you choose a testing framework today? This is the information you have now. You have a good understanding of how the tools work. What do we do now? First of all, I hope we all agree in some way that choosing a testing framework has several reasons. Some of them are to reduce maintenance cost. I don't want to rewrite my framework every single time a new browser version comes out, or every single time the protocol changes, which basically makes me faster and more reactive to changes that happen in the industry, in the ecosystem as well. And this is going back to this first slide where I was asking most of you if you would choose Selenium today as a tool to automate browsers. And this is the thing, like Selenium has none of these features, like not a single one, I think. Yeah, maybe cross-browser, and maybe speed as well, because most of the comparisons you see online is like everything is running localhost, and localhost, everything is fast. But yeah, the point here is that when you're building a testing framework, you want to have some of these features, like you want to have something that allows you to configure the test without hard coding the browser version, and many more things, right? You would like to have a configuration file like web.io. You can configure the browser, the capabilities, many things in a configuration file instead in every single testing file. You want to have things like patterns for testing, like a way to generate page objects faster, a way to do local and remote execution, for example. If at some point your company gets more successful and you decide to launch a mobile application, it would be cool if your framework already supports that, right? So these are features that sometimes we consider when choosing a testing framework. And there are a few things that sometimes we don't consider so much, right? Well, obviously, it depends if we're in a cross team that we work together. Maybe we would like to have the same programming language for everyone, so there is more opportunity for collaboration. But also we check the GitHub project, right? We check like how active it is, how many stars, how many contributors are working on the project, how sustainable it is in the long term. But one key thing I believe we forget to check is how is the project being governed. And I want to make a small parenthesis here. So it's something we miss sometimes to check because doing browser automation and testing is like an investment you do in your daily job. Like usually you don't build tests for just a couple of weeks. Usually you build tests that last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that's an investment that you want to be sure to be made in the right tool. So one example, I have two examples basically. There was a tool that was embedded in Angular, which was Protractor. Protractor was widely used by many people. Who was using Protractor from this room? And what happened when Angular said, we're not going to support Protractor anymore? Did they give you a way? Did they give you a way to take the framework out of Protractor and maybe make it available by the community? Was there a way in their governance to take this out and make it sustainable in the long term? It was a complicated choice, so people had to start finding alternatives. This investment for years in Protractor was gone to the nowhere, and then there is another good example. Facebook, as I hope many know, most of it is built in PHP. Facebook created the PHP bindings for WebDriver many years ago. For some reason, they decided we don't want to maintain this anymore. But their governance allowed to the community to propose to make a way to take the project outside of Facebook and keep maintaining the project in the long time. So that was a safe bet because at least the governance was allowing people to do that move. And that's why I'm cautious about choosing something like Cypress or Playwright, because clearly it's owned by a company. And God forbid, what if Cypress doesn't do well? What if Microsoft changes the strategy about their developer industry? What if testing is not, I don't think it will happen, but what if testing is not that important for them anymore? So we have to be aware of if it's not in the right state right now, we can actually make proposals to them. Is there a way for us to contribute more? Okay, so that's an open question that I leave for you all there. So some alternatives out there that I believe are important. This is not the exact list, there are more, but these are the ones I have been in touch with them, and I think they are good options for you all. And they focus on all these bullet points summarized on this. They enable you to write tests right away. You don't have to think about automatic waiting, reporting, and so on. So many of these tools have this for you already. I'm a Java person. I mostly write things in Java, so that's why I start with Java, and I have some examples about this one. My recommendation is Selenite. It's a great tool that works for mobile and browsers. And the best example is here in the login test. If you want to write a test with Selenium, with just login, it will be maybe 15 to 20 lines, very verbose. With Selenite, you just do 4 lines. And the cool thing is that if someone doesn't know how to code, just by reading the test, they kind of get an idea of what is happening. And that's very interesting because this enables collaboration across different roles in the team. It reduces the code you have to write to actually write a test. So for example, in Selenium, you do something like this. And in Selenite, you do something much more shorter. So it's more readable, easier to maintain, and so on. Assertions and waits. You would do something this length, which is very annoying, very verbose, hard to maintain, hard to read. And in Selenite, you just do this. This element should be visible, and that's it. And that's what we're trying to promote in the Selenium project. Stop using Selenium, use a tool that helps you be successful and reach your goals. Error messages, much better than Selenium, like giving you an exact pointer where things are happening and saving a screenshot for you right away. And also, parallelization works out of the box, which is one of the key things that many people try to achieve when automating large applications. So you have like 100 tests, you would like to run them in parallel at some point. Mobile integration, so please check it out. This is my main recommendation for today. Use a tool like Selenide instead of using Selenium directly. Same thing with Python. Great tool maintained by Michael Mintz, one of the most knowledgeable person in the ecosystem. So I would need a single talk to talk about this framework because it has so many features like visual testing, reporting. It has a mode to create tutorials where basically it highlights all the things you're doing in the automation process, basically to teach people who are getting onboarded on your team how the application works. Like, it has just too many different use cases. So please check it out. For Ruby, one of the classics, this is a classic tool. Actually, Water existed before Selenium existed. And I just want to highlight this tool because many frameworks have copied their knowledge into their frameworks from this tool. So, for example, this was the first tool that tried an approach when executing remote tests, like many people like to do. Is the element present? Is it displayed? OK, then I click. So this tool takes the approach of like, let's click. If it's not there, then I rescue the error, and I figure out what to do. So if you're into Ruby, which it's a language that is going down these days, not so many users, but this is a good option for you. Capybara is also a good option in the Ruby ecosystem. .NET, you have Atata, same thing, many frameworks, many tools, many reports, and so on, automatic waiting, and more. And let's close with JavaScript, Web.io. I think it's the hidden gem. It's a tool that offers so many options for you. I think their onboarding is a bit hard to go through, but when you get it set up, it's an excellent tool, easier to maintain, and very successful in mobile and desktop. And yeah, I want to mention as well Playwright. So on one side, I don't like Playwright because they are saying things that are not true. Like, they put the logo of Firefox and Safari, but they don't actually automate Firefox and Safari. Because Firefox and Safari, they don't have CDP in it. And Playwright uses CDP to automate browsers. So what they do, they take the open source version of Firefox and the open source version of WebKit, which is not Safari. They put CDP on top, they wrap it, and they release a new binary that you can use to automate those browsers with your web application. So the browser version is very tightly coupled to the Playwright version you're using, which is not ideal, because you want to automate the browser that your actual user is using in their laptop. And I don't know how Microsoft works inside. I guess at some point they saw, like, man, we're doing a lot of work here to like patch these browsers in every single release. It's a bit too much. Is there something we can do to collaborate? Is maybe something we can reuse? So about a couple of months ago, they started to add experimental support for BiDi. And that's why I'm now starting to like Playwright, because they see the opportunity to collaborate, to work together, and have something that works for everyone. Imagine if Playwright and Puppeteer and other tools are now able to automate all browsers. We just want to enable people to be successful in their projects, and that's the main goal. So have a look. Hopefully they open this to their users soon. Yeah, that's about Playwright. So my prediction is that in a few months, maybe a year, we're going to see also Playwright being part of the BiDi ecosystem and just delivering tools for the community to be successful. So starting to wrap up, basically, if you want to choose a tool, please get the context, do an evaluation that makes sense, not just the hello world, like something that is useful, a login test or something that makes you understand how the tool can help you or can hinder you, the risk associated and all that. Please, if you can, focus on testing instead of like building the framework. Most of the time, we find a tool that is doing 90% of the work for us. We just have to do the 10. But I have seen cases where people are not happy with that and they decide to do the 100% and discard the tool. So please really focus on a tool that helps you be successful and enable to deliver value for your team, your company, and your customers. And something I learned from Simon Stewart, a phrase he says that I don't know who created it, but basically, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And to close this, I just want to invite you to the Selenium and Appium conference. It's happening next March 2025 in Valencia. Check it out. It's going to have a great set of speakers. I am already checking the talks they're offering, they're proposing. We're going to evaluate them soon, but there are great topics there. We welcome everyone, every single tool, Playwright, Cypress. We want to be the hub for people to exchange and share knowledge. And if you have an interesting topic to share, please propose your talk. We are looking forward to see you in Valencia next year. And this is the venue where the conference will happen, with a beach view, Mediterranean view. So why not come together, come to the conference and have some paella, and let's enjoy the browser automation and mobile automation world together. That's all I had to share for today. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for giving me some time. Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't have much time for Q&A session right now, and you can find Diego in the speakers corner, which is over there. So you can ask your questions to him there. Thank you.